Okay, friends, now we're really going to get caught up. We're on Chapter 15. The Herman W. Block Memorial Library's air conditioning unit didn't work very good. And there was only one fan, and from the minute me and Winn Dixie got in the library, he hogged it all. He lay right in front of me and wagged his tail and let it blow his fur all around. Some of his fur was pretty loose and it blew right off him like a dandelion puff. I worried about him hogging the fan, and I worried about the fan blowing him bald, but Miss Franny said not to worry about either thing, that Winn Dixie could hog the fan if he wanted, and she had never in her life seen a dog made bald by a fan. Sometimes when Miss Franny was telling a story, she would have a fit. They were small fits and they didn't last long, but what happened was she would forget what she was saying. She would just stop and start to shake like a little leaf. And when that happened, Winn Dixie would get up from the fan and sit right at Miss Franny Block's side. He would sit up tall, protecting her, with his ears standing up straight on his head like soldiers. And when Miss Franny stopped shaking and started talking again, Winn Dixie would lick her hand and lie back down in front of the fan. Whenever Miss Franny had one of her fits, it reminded me of Winn Dixie in a thunderstorm. There were a lot of thunderstorms that summer. I got real good at holding on to Winn Dixie whenever they came. I held on to him and comforted him and whispered to him and rocked him just the same way he tried to comfort Miss Franny when she had her fits. Only I held on to Winn Dixie for another reason too. I held on to him tight so he wouldn't run away. It all made me think about Gloria Dump. I wondered who comforted her when she heard those bottles knocking together, those ghosts chattering about the things she had done wrong. I wanted to comfort Gloria Dump, and I decided the best way to do that would be to read her a book, to read it to her loud enough to keep the ghosts away. And so I asked Miss Franny. I said, "Miss Franny, I've got a grown-up friend whose eyes are going on her, and I would like to read her a book out loud. Do you have any suggestions?" "Suggestions?" Miss Franny said. "Yes, ma'am, I have suggestions. Of course I have suggestions. How about Gone with the Wind?" "What's that about?" I asked her. "Why," said Miss Franny, "it's a wonderful story about the Civil War." "The Civil War?" I said. "Do not tell me you have never heard of the Civil War." Miss Franny Block looked like she was going to faint. She waved her hands in front of her face. "I know about the Civil War," I told her. "That was the war between the South and the North over slavery." "Slavery, yes," said Miss Franny. "It was also about states' rights and money. It was a terrible war. My great-grandfather fought in that war. He was just a boy." "Your great-grandfather?" "Yes, ma'am. Litmus W. Block. Now there's a story." Winn Dixie yawned real big and lay down on his side with a thump and a sigh. I swear he knew that phrase, "Now there's a story," and he knew it meant we weren't going anywhere real soon. "Go ahead and tell it to me, Miss Franny," I said, and I sat down cross-legged next to Winn Dixie. I pushed him and tried to get him to share the fan, but he pretended he was asleep, and he wouldn't move. I was all settled in and ready for a good story when the door banged, and that pinched-faced Amanda Wilkinson came in. Winn Dixie sat up and stared at her. He tried out a smile on her, but she didn't smile back, so he lay down again. "I'm ready for another book," Amanda said, slamming her book down on Miss Franny's desk. "Well," said Miss Franny, "maybe you wouldn't mind waiting. I'm telling India Opal a story about my great-grandfather. You are, of course, more than welcome to listen. It will just be a minute." Amanda sighed, a real dramatic sigh, and stared past me. She pretended like she wasn't interested, but she was. I could tell. "Come sit over here," said Miss Franny. "I'll stand, thank you," said Amanda. "Suit yourself," Miss Franny shrugged. "Now where was I? Oh, yes, Litmus. Litmus W. Block. Chapter 16. Litmus W. Block was just a boy when the firing on Fort Sumter occurred, Miss Franny Block said, as she started in on her story. "Fort Sumter?" I said. "It was the firing on Fort Sumter that started the war," said Amanda. "Okay," I said. I shrugged. Well, Litmus was 14 years old. He was strong and big, but he was still just a boy. His daddy, Artley W. Block, had already enlisted, and Litmus told his mama that he could not stand by and let the South get beat, so he went to fight too. Miss Franny looked around the library, and then she whispered, "Men and boys always want to fight. They're always looking for a reason to go to war. It's the saddest thing. They have this abiding notion that war is fun, and no history lesson will convince them differently." Anyway, Litmus went and enlisted. He lied about his age. Yes, ma'am, like I said, he was a big boy, and the army took him, and Litmus went off to war just like that. Left behind his mother and 3 sisters. He went off to be a hero. But he soon found out the truth. Miss Franny closed her eyes and shook her head. What truth? I asked her. That war is hell, Miss Franny said with her eyes still closed. Pure hell. Hell is a cuss word, said Amanda. I stole a look at her. Her face was pinched up even more than usual. War, said Miss Franny, with her eyes still closed, should be a cuss word too. She shook her head and opened her eyes. She pointed at me and then she pointed at Amanda. You, neither of you can imagine. No, ma'am, Amanda and me said at exactly the same time. We looked real quick at each other and then back at Miss Franny. You cannot imagine. Litmus was hungry all the time, and he was covered with all manner of vermin, fleas and lice. And in the winter he was so cold he thought for sure he would freeze to death. And in the summer, why, there's nothing worse than war in the summertime. It stinks. And the only thing that made Litmus forget that he was hungry and itchy and hot or cold was that he was getting shot at, and he got shot at quite a bit. And he was nothing more than a child. Did he get killed? I asked Miss Franny. Oh, good grief, said Amanda, and rolled her eyes. Now, Opal, Miss Franny said, I wouldn't be standing in this room telling this story if he was killed. I wouldn't exist. No, ma'am, he had to live. But he was a changed man. Yes, ma'am, a changed man. He walked back home when the war was over. He walked from Virginia all the way back to Georgia. He didn't have a horse. Nobody had a horse except for the Yankees. He walked, and when he got home, there was no home there. Where was it? I asked her. I didn't care if Amanda thought I was stupid. I wanted to know. Why, Miss Franny shouted so loud that Winn Dixie and Amanda Wilkinson and me all jumped. The Yankees burned it! Yes, ma'am, burned it to the ground. What about his sisters? Amanda asked. She moved around the desk and came and sat on the floor. She looked up at Miss Franny. What happened to them? Dead. They died of typhoid fever. Oh, no, Amanda said in a soft voice. And his mama? I whispered. Dead too. And his father? Amanda asked. What happened to him? He died on the battlefield. Litmus was an orphan? I asked. Yes, ma'am, said Miss Franny Block. Litmus was an orphan. This is a sad story, I told Miss Franny. It sure is, said Amanda. I was amazed she was agreeing with me about something. I'm not done yet, Miss Franny said. Winn Dixie started to snore, and I nudged him with my foot, trying to make him quit. I wanted to hear the rest of the story. It was important to me to hear how Litmus survived after losing everything he loved. Chapter 17. Well, Litmus came home from the war, said Miss Franny, as she went on with her story, and found himself alone. And he sat down on what used to be the front step of his house, and he cried, and he cried. He cried just like a baby. He missed his mama, and he missed his daddy, and he missed his sisters, and he missed the boy that he used to be. When he finally finished crying, he had the strangest sensation. He felt like he wanted something sweet. He wanted a piece of candy. He hadn't had a piece of candy in years, and it was right then that he made a decision. Yes, ma'am, Litmus W. Block figured the world was a sorry affair, and that it was had enough ugly things in it, and what he was going to do was concentrate on putting something sweet in it. He got up and started walking. He walked all the way to Florida, and the whole time he was walking, he was planning. Planning what? I asked. Why, planning the candy factory. Did he build it? I asked. Of course he did. It's still standing out on Fairville Road. That old building? Said Amanda. The big spooky one? It is not spooky, said Miss Franny. It was the birthplace of the family fortune. It was there that my great-grandfather manufactured the Litmus lozenge, a candy that was famous the world over. I've never heard of it, said Amanda. Me neither, I said. Well, said Miss Franny, they aren't made anymore. The world, it seems, lost its appetite for Litmus lozenges, but I still happen to have a few. She opened the top drawer of her desk, and it was full of candy. She opened the drawer below that. It was full of candy, too. Miss Franny Block's whole desk was full of candy. Would you care for a Litmus lozenge? She asked Amanda and me. Yes, please, said Amanda. Sure, I said. Can Winn Dixie have one, too? Well, I've never known a dog that cared for hard candy, said Miss Franny, but he's welcome to try one. Miss Franny gave Amanda one Litmus lozenge and me 2. I unwrapped one and held it out to Winn Dixie. He sat up and sniffed it and wagged his tail and took the candy from between my fingers, real gentle. He tried to chew on it, and when that didn't work, he just swallowed the whole thing in one big gulp. Then he wagged his tail at me and lay back down. I ate my litmus lozenge slow. It tasted good. It tasted like root beer and strawberry and something else I didn't have a name for. Something that made me feel kind of sad. I looked over at Amanda. She was sucking on her candy and thinking hard. "Do you like it?" Miss Franny asked me. "Yes, ma'am," I told her. "What about you, Amanda? Do you like the litmus lozenge?" "Yes, ma'am," she said, "but it makes me think of things I feel sad about." I wondered what in the world Amanda Wilkinson had to feel sad about. She wasn't new to town. She had a mama and a daddy. I had seen her with them in church. "There's a secret ingredient in there," Miss Franny said. "I know it," I told her. "I can taste it. What is it?" "Sorrow," Miss Franny said. "Not everybody can taste it. Children especially seem to have a hard time knowing it's there." "Well, I can taste it," I said. "Me too," said Amanda. "Well then," Miss Franny said, "you've probably both had your share of sadness." "I had to move away from Watley and leave all my friends," I said. "That's one sadness I've had. And Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry are always picking on me. That's another sadness. And the biggest one, my biggest sadness, is that my mama left me when I was still small, and I can hardly remember her. I keep hoping I'll get to meet her and tell her some stories." "It makes me miss Carson," said Amanda. She sounded like she was going to cry. "I have to go." And she got up and almost ran out of the Herman W. Block Memorial Library. "Who's Carson?" I asked Miss Franny. She shook her head. "Sorrow," she said. "It is a sorrow-filled world." "But how do you put that in a piece of candy?" I asked her. "How do you get the taste in there?" "That's the secret," she said. "That's why Litmus made a fortune. He manufactured a piece of candy that tasted sweet and sad at the same time. Can I have a piece to take to my friend Gloria Dump, and another one to take to Otis down at Gertrude's Pets, and one for the preacher, and one for Sweetie Pie, too?" "You may have as many as you want," said Miss Franny. So I stuffed my pockets full of litmus lozenges, and I thanked Miss Franny for her story, and I checked out Gone with the Wind, which was a very big book, and I told Winn Dixie to get up, and the two of us left and went over to Gloria Dump's. I rode right past the Dewberry's house. Dunlap and Stevie were playing football in the front yard, and I was just getting ready to stick my tongue out at them, but then I thought about what Miss Franny had said about war being hell, and I thought about what Gloria Dump said about not judging them too hard. And so I just waved instead. They stood and stared at me, but when I was almost all the way past, I saw Dunlap put his hand in the air and wave back. "Hey," he hollered. "Hey, Opal." I waved harder, and I thought about Amanda Wilkinson, and how it was neat that she liked a good story the same as I did. And I wondered again, who was Carson? We're going to stop there. Next week we'll find out who Carson is. Thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying this book. And I will see you at library next week. Bye, friends.